The trade war between the United States and China, which seemed never-ending, suddenly quieted down in a surprising way. An unbelievable tax cut shocked the whole world. Could this be a sign of a real détente, or just the calm before a storm? Why would two economic superpowers agree to such a massive tariff reduction when tensions still remain? And what awaits after 90 days of pause? Let's uncover the secrets behind this groundbreaking negotiation. After months of tension so tight it felt like a stretched string ready to snap, the unthinkable happened. The US and China shook hands. Yes, the two economic giants, who had been slapping tariffs on each other non-stop for ages, suddenly agreed to pause their trade war for 90 days, starting from May 14, 2025. But it wasn't just talk. Both sides took bold actions that stunned global markets. The US slashed tariffs on Chinese goods from a suffocating 145% down to 30%, a rare and deep cut. On the flip side, China didn't hold back either, chopping tariffs on American products from 125% to just 10%. Everything happened so fast that the financial world barely had time to blink. Many called it a spectacular pivot on the battlefield, leaving the world both relieved and on edge. But hold on. Don't celebrate too soon. Everyone knows in this high-stakes game between two giants, every move is calculated. Is this the start of lasting peace, or just a pause before an even bigger storm? To grasp why this handshake caused such a global stir, we need to rewind and look at what led to it. For months, the world's two biggest economies had been locked in a fierce tug-of-war, neither willing to give an inch. Every tariff slapped by one side was met with an immediate counter, pushing tax rates ever higher, like an elevator out of control. At one point, tariffs peaked at a staggering 145%, making goods nearly gridlocked at the border and throwing global supply chains into chaos, like a giant machine with jammed gears. Then, out of nowhere, on a weekend no one expected, the two sides met quietly, somewhere called but no one's quite sure where exactly. What grabbed attention were the faces who stepped forward afterward. Scott Benn, the U.S. Treasury Secretary, and Jisong Gray, the U.S. Trade Representative, announced the breakthrough. But don't be fooled, this wasn't a casual meeting. Behind the scenes, the White House pulled the strings, orchestrating a strategic move in a tense moment. This wasn't just a friendly chat, it was a turning point that could temporarily shift the trade war's course, at least for 90 days. But everyone knows this is just the opening act. When looking at this temporary handshake, it's crucial to understand what each side really wants and why they chose this path right now. For the Trump administration, this is not about surrendering or truly stepping back. Instead, it's a calculated move, a pause to gather strength for bigger plays ahead. Trump and his team urgently need to ease the inflation pressure weighing heavily on American citizens. At the same time, they are preparing for the midterm congressional elections in 2026, where support from exporting businesses is absolutely vital. These businesses have suffered serious losses due to the trade war. Most importantly, the US does not want to lose its #1 spot on the global economic map, especially as China grows stronger and challenges that position. That's why every move is carefully weighed, not a retreat, but a strategy of step back 1, move forward 3. While the US has a clear strategy, China faces a series of severe economic challenges that force it to make temporary concessions. China's exports have plunged to alarming levels, foreign direct investment is nearly frozen, and the yuan continues to lose value, making the economy even more strained. On top of that, unemployment rates are rising sharply, especially among newly graduated students. A serious concern because a jobless youth can trigger a cascade of social problems. Furthermore, supply chains already strangled have become even harder to control, making the situation more tense than ever. Faced with this reality, Beijing must find a short-term breather, a pause to avoid systemic collapse, and to buy time to rethink its next moves. This is not a sign of weakness, but a survival tactic in a very tough landscape. As soon as the news about the 90-day tariff reduction deal was announced, global financial markets immediately responded with overwhelming positivity, as if a huge burden had just been lifted. The United States S&P 500 index surged by 2.8%. The Nasdaq 100 jumped even higher with an increase of 3.6%, while the Dow Jones Industrial Average rose by 2.3%. These numbers speak volumes, reflecting a growing confidence returning to investors worldwide after many months of trade tensions. Notably, gold prices, usually seen as a safe haven when the global economy is unstable, dropped sharply by $100 per ounce, falling to about $1,322 per ounce. This signals that investors' anxiety and skepticism have somewhat eased, replaced by optimism and hope for a more stable period ahead. It wasn't just the stock markets feeling the impact. Businesses on both sides, in the United States and China, quickly sensed the positive effects. In the US, sectors like agriculture, seafood, technology, and textiles, which were heavily hit during the trade war, now seem revitalized. They have the opportunity to boost orders, clear inventory, and improve revenue after a long period of constraint. On the other side of the Pacific, China also joined the game. The significant tariff cuts mean Chinese goods will become cheaper when entering the US market, boosting competitiveness, especially as domestic demand in China shows signs of cooling. This escape route is crucial for Beijing to maintain export industries and ease pressure on its domestic economy. In summary, this agreement is not just a much-needed cool-down for global markets, but also creates a valuable window for the two largest economies in the world to catch their breath, stabilize the situation, and prepare for the next moves in a long and ongoing trade battle. However, as many experts warn, this is merely a pause, not an end or lasting reconciliation. Although the recent 90-day tariff reduction agreement has sparked a wave of optimism and hopes for a significant turning point in the strained relationship between the United States and China, the underlying reality remains far more complicated and less reassuring. Beneath the surface, the core and most contentious conflicts that have fueled this long-standing trade war remain largely unresolved, casting doubt on the durability of this agreement. From the American perspective, there is absolutely no willingness to concede on key red lines that are considered non-negotiable for protecting the country's national interests. These include critical issues such as technology security, intellectual property rights, and preventing technological interference, areas that the U.S. government views as essential to maintaining its competitive edge and safeguarding sensitive industries. Despite the temporary easing of tariffs, Washington remains steadfast in its demand that these concerns be addressed fully before any meaningful long-term détente can be achieved. On the other side, China is equally firm in maintaining its sovereignty and political system. Beijing refuses to accept any foreign interference in its state governance model or its centralized economic management structure. These demands have been consistently reiterated by the U.S. as conditions for easing tensions. But for China, such interference is viewed as an unacceptable infringement on its internal affairs and core principles. This fundamental impasse means that both sides remain deeply entrenched in their positions, with little room for compromise on the most sensitive and strategic issues. As a result, what the world is witnessing now is less of a breakthrough or true reconciliation, and more akin to a temporary ceasefire. A strategic pause in hostilities where both parties step back momentarily, not to heal or resolve their differences, but simply to catch their breath and regroup. This pause allows each side to regain strength, recalibrate strategies, and prepare for the next phase of what remains a high-stakes and complex geopolitical contest. The most troubling aspect of this scenario is the high likelihood that once the 90-day period lapses, the situation may rapidly revert to the antagonistic status quo if not escalate further. The cycle of tit-for-tat retaliations and renewed trade tensions could erupt again, potentially with greater intensity and wider repercussions for the global economy. Rather than a lasting solution, this agreement appears to be a tactical break, a brief intermission in an ongoing, fierce struggle for global influence and power between two economic giants. In essence, this is far from a resolution. It is a carefully calculated maneuver within a broader, prolonged conflict where both sides are cautiously testing waters, managing risks, and positioning themselves for future battles on the world stage. Looking back to recent history, the United States and China signed a highly anticipated agreement in May 2020, known as the Phase 1 deal, in their long-running trade conflict. China committed to purchasing up to $200 billion worth of American goods, a massive figure, seen as a clear sign of a developing cooperation. However, the results fell short of expectations. China failed to fulfill its promises. A major reason was the COVID-19 pandemic, a devastating shock that disrupted global supply chains, throwing plans into disarray and making it extremely difficult to meet commitments. But that was not all. Beyond the pandemic, a core problem causing the failure was China's economic system itself, which was not flexible enough to fully deliver on such large and pressured commitments. Limitations in how the economy operates, centralized management, and internal factors hindered Beijing's ability to meet the expectations set by the US. The lesson from the 2020 agreement shows that signing on paper is not enough. Mutual trust and execution capability are what truly matter. Therefore, no matter how positive the current 90-day tariff reduction may seem, we must maintain a cautious perspective and not hastily believe that everything will run smoothly or that a new era of cooperation will immediately begin. This serves as a reminder that in the power and trade game between two giants, every move is carefully calculated, and agreements are more like tactical pauses rather than genuine reconciliations. After 90 days of suspended tensions, the big question remains: will this be a true breakthrough, ushering in a new era of cooperation, or merely a short break before another wave of conflicts hits? The greatest concern is the fragile strategic trust between the two sides. No matter how many commitments or agreements are signed, without genuine and long-term trust, all achievements are like a thin layer of ice on a lake, easily shattered by the slightest turbulence. This trust is the foundation for any sustainable agreement, yet it remains severely lacking between the US and China. Moreover, the geopolitical landscape is increasingly complex and tense. China is gravitating closer to Russia, even selling arms to Moscow. Actions that prompt the US to remain vigilant and strengthen strategic partnerships in the Asia-Pacific region. Washington continues to expand technological cooperation with countries in this area to reinforce its position and create a clearer economic and strategic encirclement. These moves reflect not only economic competition but also a tense power game where every step is meticulously planned, requiring patience and long-term strategy. Therefore, the 90 days of tariff reductions and tension suspension are merely a necessary pause for both sides to consolidate internal strength and prepare for subsequent moves. This is not the end of their confrontation, but rather a new chapter in the complex trade and political struggle between two superpowers. The game is far from over, and the challenges ahead will be even more severe. Ultimately, this 90-day agreement is clearly a temporary strategic maneuver, not a sign of a new era of cooperation. It is like a calculated move where both sides agree to pause, catch their breath, reinforce internal power, and prepare for the next steps. It is about more than just trade. It is part of a larger game involving technology, finance, and global power. Between these two powerful tigers, lasting peace is nearly impossible. Instead, there will only be brief pauses before new, fierce, and relentless clashes. The game is ongoing, and the world will continue to watch every move with unceasing tension and curiosity.